Hey, welcome back. My name is Amanda. If you are new to my channel, I just want to go ahead and give the heads up, just like in the ending of the last video, I am not doing so hot, but I do still want to get these videos out for you. We are going to be reading chapter 8 of the Edgar Cayce Guide to Self-Healing. And if you are new here, you will notice that my book is old and janky, and now I just realized in the last video my book in the back is trying to fall apart. And funny enough, I actually keep my books not in the best place that they should be, but they definitely are in a spot where they're not doing too much tussling. So I don't even know why the back is just like falling apart. But let's go ahead and jump into chapter 8. The Soul According to Edgar Cayce. At this point in our study of the methods of healing of Edgar Cayce, we cannot help but be impressed by this man. Although he never went past grade school, he shows a depth of knowledge of things spiritual and material that literally overwhelms. Which all goes to illustrate the implications of this book, namely that a person who knows how to develop the self and complies with the laws of nature and of God can really accomplish great and wonderful things. All this is open to those who, like Cayce, freely and willingly give of themselves to the powers within. Having reviewed Cayce's concept of mind and body, let us now look at the third component of the triune entity, which is the soul or spirit. We all wonder about the soul. We admit its existence, yet we also admit to a sense of inadequacy when attempting to understand and appreciate the soul. What does Cayce say? What then, the entity asks, is a soul? What does it look like? What is its plane of experience or activity? How may ye find one? It may not be separated in the material world from its own place of abode in the body physical, yet the soul looks through the eyes of a body and handles with the emotions of the sense of touch and may be aware through the factors in every sense and thus add to its body as much as the food of the material, definitely caught me off guard, of the material world has made for a growing physical body in which the soul may and does indeed dwell in its passage or activity in any individual phase of an experience in the earth. The soul is that which the Maker gave to every entity or individual in the beginning. It is seeking the home or place of the Maker. The soul is an individuality that may grow to be one with or separate from the whole. As Christians, most of us believe that the soul is created by God and infused into the body at the same time of conception. Cayce tells another possibility. In his readings, he has another dimension to the story of creation. According to him, all souls were created at once of spirit or God. It is comparable to a great ball of fire shooting off sparks or parts of itself into the physical creation of the earth. In the readings, we get the picture of each soul spinning through time and space as an offspring of the Creator, but lacking in soul experience. They are like uncut records or blank recording tape, as someone put it. Cayce tells us that the soul's awareness or consciousness of creation was to be later recorded within the skeins, SKEINS, of time and space as God's book of remembrance, and frequently referred to as the Akashic records or the book of life. In this record, no experience is ever lost. Every thought, word, deed, experience, and relationship is programmed in the unconscious memory of each individual. What is the longing of the soul? Each soul wants nothing more than to return to it at one-ment with the creative source, which is God. But it's not that easy. There are lessons to be learned. The soul has to experience creation within our own solar system. According to Cayce, we have developed our emotional bodies during many incarnations in the flesh, while our mental attributes have been developed during interim planetary experiences between our lives. So we could say that each individual has to learn the lesson to be learned while in the earth experiences. Who determines what must be learned? It's all set by the individual's soul purposes and ideals, but that does not lock out the interplay of free will, always a valuable commodity in the Cayce scheme of things. Then a soul, the offspring of the Creator, when entering into a consciousness which becomes a manifestation in any plane or sphere of activity, is given free will for its use of those abilities or qualities or conditions in its experience. And it will demonstrate, manifest, and show forth what it reflects in its activities towards that first cause. The spiritual nature of man or soul is thought of as a unit of energy created by God years and years before the creation of the earth. And the purpose of the soul is to help bring creation to flower. Our souls in a series of incarnations as men in the earth, says Cayce, build through their choices free will. Their whole condition of body and mind at any given level of expression. Our attitudes and emotions clearly mirror our state of being. They are how we review our growth patterns. We look at them and we can see what state of development we have thus far achieved. But also they are a way of measuring thoughts, words, and actions in the light of the universal laws. Thus, through the soul, we are enabled to bring about a more creative, spiritually centered life experience. I choose to think that each one of us has an individual soul, that there is one, the Spirit of God, going through each and every one, that makes each and every one of us akin, that makes all life and all nature akin. For life in every form is dependent upon that force we call God. For as matter came into being, it is permeated with the Spirit of God that gives life with its ability to carry itself on and make of itself that which has been determined by God that it should be. Man only who has chosen to be one with God and a companion with him from the beginning chose rather to go with his own way as Adam. But he has prepared a way through Christ, who came into the world, that we through him might have life and have it more abundantly, that we at all periods of our development might be more conscious of the life of God that is within us. Christ himself taught that we must test the spirits, and those who acknowledge that Jesus the Christ has come in the flesh are born of God. The truth makes alive, and the life makes you free. When asked the question, are souls perfect as created by God in the beginning? And if so, where is there any need for development? Cayce replied, the answer to this may only be found in the evolution of life in such a way as to be understood by the finite mind. In the first cause or principle, all is perfect. That portion of the whole manifest in the creation of souls may become a living soul and equal with the Creator. To reach that position when separated from Him, it must pass through all stages of development in order that it may be one with the Creator. What about the lower forms of creations, such as animals? Do these... Oh wow, they actually didn't put in the proper lettering. Do these have souls? Do they have any life at all in spirit form? Cayce answers, okay, I'm actually happy that I'm reading this. These two just have misspellings. There's been parts of this book so far, I'm like, is that what you actually meant? Maybe it's like old-timey reading, but this right here is evident that somebody didn't thoroughly edit it properly or proofread it. There you go. All have the spirit force. Man, as he was made, carries the soul force, and which was made equal with the Creator in the beginning in relation to production in his man's plane of existence. Hence the necessity for development of that soul energy, for in man we find both the spirit entity and the physical entity. Cayce uses the symbol of light to convey the power of the soul. For the soul seeks its own in him who is the light, the life, the way, and when there are rebellions of body or mind against this search, is there any wonder that atoms of the body cause high blood pressure, indigestion, etc.? For all such reactions are only the rebellion against truth and light, error and correction in the physical body, and thy body is indeed the temple of the living God. God moved and said, let there be light, and there was light. not the light of the sun, but rather that light which through which but rather that light which through which in which every soul had and has and okay through which in which every soul had and has and ever had its being. What is the life of the soul? How does the soul move and operate? In other words, Cayce tells us that this takes place through the body that the soul inhabits. But there is also the reality of what is called spiritual energy or vitality. Spiritual element, the vitality, produces the motive forces of the entity, whether physical or spiritual. Spiritual forces being the life, the reproductive principle, the soul, the development principle. Spiritual contact is made through the glandular forces of creative energies. Thus we find a connection and an association of the spiritual being with the mental self in any of those centers glandular from which reflexes react with all of the organs, all of the emotions, all of the activities of a physical body. Spirit or soul, then, for Cayce, is that which we can comprehend only by the application of it, by what we do for someone else. And this is a vital piece of information for the self-healer. Of course, we cannot expect to see the soul of self or of another on this earth. We can perceive or sense the invisible face, but what we cannot see of the soul cannot even be perceived by the five senses. But this does not prevent us from studying along lines of thought how the inner man or the soul develops. We have to accept the existence of the soul, even though we cannot touch it or feel it, for we all know that within each of us is that something that we call soul, the entity, the being. We know that this lives on and on long after we have shed the body. Cayce teaches that the attributes of the soul and the spirit are as many more as the attributes of the physical and mental mind. Each in the beginning was endowed with the same conditioned position. Each in itself is building to itself by means of its development through the ages as they manifest upon the earth plane. Asked about the twin souls, Cayce answered that there are identical souls. No. No two leaves of a tree, no two blades of grass are the same. They are the complement one to another, yes. Look on the individuality of the individual. Each soul is a universe in itself. The soul must ever remain one, says Cayce, because it is really made in the image of the Creator. For while the body changes, for it too must be purified, the soul remains ever as one, for it is in the image of the Creator and has its birthright in Him. And if this birthright is sold for the satisfying of those urges of earthly desires, they become stumbling blocks in the experience, and thus the entity finds itself constantly in each and every environment, meeting itself either mentally, materially, physically, in the environs and in the experiences which are a portion of each and every soul. Hence we find those influences arising in the present experience. Forever is a soul, and forever is not one word in this sense. Forever is a soul, an entity meeting itself in its shortcomings, in that wherein it has missed or chosen in the improper direction. For remember, the good lives on and is magnified. The errors become then as stumbling stones as to be kept or to be turned into stepping stones into those directions and ways as to be the more perfect way, or as expressed a more excellent way. Someone saw the relationship of the soul to the physical in a dream about a tent in God. Cayce explained it this way. This is an emblematical form, shows the entity how an understanding of the spiritual forces in the physical being may so magnify self-interest that the entity may come under the direct influence of spiritual laws. The tent represents self's own insecurity. The looking up and ordering of God shows how the prayers of the righteous will save many. The ordering of God is to the self within to so direct his life as to be in closer touch with him. This will make possible a channel through which the orders of the highest may come. It would be good for the entity to read Jude, especially 10th, 11th, and 12th verses. What can hurt the soul? What can keep us from the spiritual development so necessary to maintain our level of healing? Sorry, I like to try to keep it going. Carnal desires are always a deterrent to spiritual development. Even as it is necessary to keep the face free of unsightliness, so it is essential for the individual to improve the mental, the moral, and the physical standards. Only if this is done can the spiritual forces of the entity express in him the works of him who gives all good and perfect gifts. True, an individual, a soul, must become less and less of self or thoughts of self, yet when those activities of others in relationships to the mental, the spiritual, the soul developments are such that the own soul development and own soul expression become in jeopardy, then, as he hath given, I came not to bring peace, but a sword. I came to give peace, but not as the world counts peace, but as that which makes for those experiences wherein the soul, the entity, is to fulfill those purposes, those activities for which it, the soul entity, came into being. Self-healers must work towards developing the powers of the soul. That means they should seek spiritual development as a first priority if they would balance the body and mind with the soul. Pursue spiritual development. This is of the psychic nature, yes, but find the spirit first, not spiritualism, but spirituality in thy own life. That the entity comes seeking indicates it is the house of Israel, and in seeking there may indeed come that answer which will enable the entity to use this present experience as a stepping stone for the unfoldment of a greater experience and walk with the consciousness of the spiritual life. For those that would seek knowledge and understanding, seek same early, and when they are old, they will not depart from their consciousness. From the Cayce readings, it is obvious that the path to proper spiritual development is twofold. 1, the proper exercise and appreciation of one's freedom. 2, the bold acceptance of responsibility for one's purpose and destiny. It seems to me that these two qualities, freedom and responsibility, are therefore essential to the development of a self-healer, for in growing along these paths, he heightens his own power of creation, thereby bringing himself into closer contact with the creative force in whom we move and have our being. Let us then review what Cayce tells us about freedom and responsibility, paying close attention to the pathways he illumes for us. Freedom, Cayce says, is the birthright of each soul. The will is the factor that in choice is the birthright, and that is only so for appetites that gratify for the moment of self-desires or self-indulgences. And what the entity does about that free will is the heritage of each soul as its birthright. The will makes for development or retardment, and nothing separates thee from the knowledge of the Father but thyself. True choice makes abolish of unfounded judgments, those that do not have value of a spiritual depth. However, there should not be judgments other than as of the spiritual nature or value, and not as anyone's moral code, but as to purposes of same. Excuse me. Know that the birthright of every soul is choice or will, choosing then to do that is which is to self an expression of a spiritual law, a spiritual desire. This may be hard for some to interpret, but it has become a natural thing for the entity because of its experiences, not only in the sojourn, but in others. Yet the entity must adhere to that which is the ideal, for that is the way and the truth and the light. Let me just say it. If you just so happen to see the first video that I just did, my grandma has a sixth sense. Her nose itches when someone's essentially like looking for her, and so like my nose is like just like going off the bend. I'm not doing anything. None of that. My nose is really itchy. Oh Lord. Choosing then to do. Yep, I lost it already. Yep, I'm going to start here. Know that the birthright of every soul is choice or will. Choosing then to do that which is to self an expression of a spiritual law, a spiritual desire. This may be hard for some to interpret, but it has become a natural thing for the entity because of its experiences not only in this sojourn, but in others, yet the entity must adhere to that which is the ideal, for that is the way and the truth and the light. The will is that which enables us to come close to the Creator, the ultimate source of all healing. That force, known upon this plane as will, is given to man over and above all creation. That force which may separate itself from its maker, for with will man may either adhere to or contradict the divine law. Those immutable laws which are set between the Creator and the created. Are thy choices according to thy ideal? This ye alone may answer, ye must answer. For as he hath given, ye must pay for every whit. For the law of the Lord is perfect, it may so convert the soul. But the law is not taken away, it must be fulfilled every whit, every jot and tittle. Under what law choosest thou to be aware or to work? These are the choices of men as they are choices by man according to the concept of thy spiritual law of adherence to moral standards. Our will then is the key to freedom as a self-healer. We must choose to do right and then exert our wills in that direction. For will is that developing factor with which an entity chooses or builds that freedom or that of being free. Knowing the truth as is applicable in that experience and in that various experiences as has been builded, for that builded must be met whether in thought or in deed. For thoughts are deeds in their current run as through the whole of the influence in an entity's experience. Hence, as was given, he that hateth his brother has committed as great a sin as he that slayeth a man. For the deed as the builder for every entity. For the deed is as the builder for every entity. For each soul enters the material plane for the fulfilling of a purpose, that it, the soul, may be one with the creative forces. And when such a purpose is allowed to be overridden because of the application for material gains, or for self-indulgence, or self-glorification, or for self-exaltation, then stumbling blocks are in the experience. One's development as a self-healer is really born of our experience. We have to apply our will toward development. We must constantly examine ourselves to see whether we have, as Cayce often puts it, allowed ourselves to be used by the environment and become subject to the environment, or have we developed self through the will towards our own hereditary position for all the children of God. What has our will and its freedom brought us to? Man is capable of doing anything if he chooses and puts some energy behind the choice. If we want to break the bad habit of procrastinating or some other habit, we should follow Cayce's advice. Change our mind, choose to do something other than the habit. Replace the involuntary action, which is the habit, with something constructive. For each soul, each mind, each entity is endowed with its choice. And the choice is the result of the application of self in relationships to that which is its ideal and finds manifestation in what individuals call habit or subconscious activity, yet it has its inception in that of choice. So many of our diseases are linked with the abuse of our freedom. So much of our unhappiness that we visit upon ourselves derives from choices poorly made. So the self-healer must examine his own use of freedom to see whether or not he is abusing it and thereby causing himself pain and sorrow. So soon as man contemplates his free will, he thinks of it as a means of doing the opposite of God's will, though he finds that only by doing God's will does he find happiness. Yet the notion of serving God sits ill with him, for he sees it as a sacrifice of his own will. Only in delusion and suffering, in time, in space, and patience does he come to the wisdom that his real will is the will of God, and in its practice is happiness in heaven. Cayce wants us to give our will a positive charge, a burst of creative energy, so that we can be proper channels for healing and manifestations of God's will. The key for the self-healer is receptivity, and he explains how shortly, as the will is directive as opposed to receptive, we have to attribute a positive charge to the will. No urge surpasses the individual will of an entity. That birthright of each soul, that gift of the creative force that makes or causes the individuality in an entity, the ability to know itself, to be itself, and yet one with the creative forces. In using our will, we are making use of the positive charge, which attracts us to the negative charge of the earth, and so results in our being kept there. But when we become receptive and open, when we exercise, so to speak, the negative charge, we thus release ourselves from the ties which hold us to the earth, and so we are no longer at odds with the creative forces. What the self-healer must realize then is that for him to become skilled, he must obey the universal laws. But at the same time, he must use his will properly and make the right choices on his own behalf. The individual is the one who chooses to change from being hard-headed, bigoted, and short-sighted or in error. He does this himself. Whatever a man sows, that must he reap, whether in the spiritual, mental, or material activities. The how was the principle set by the master. Thou hast read, thou shalt do this or that, but I say unto you, it is in mind. It is the attitude that counts, for one may lie just as much with the look as with words. The key to proper use of the will and its freedom is in development and self-knowledge. Through these, the soul can grow and reach its ideal, which is the creative force. With each development, I'm so sorry about my nose. There's nothing I can do about it. Like, it's when it itches, it just itches. With each development, that force known upon this plane as will is given to man over above all creation. That force may separate itself from its maker, for with the will man may either adhere to or reject divine law, those immutable laws which are set between the creator and the created. Study these, especially through any of those phases wherein the carnal or material or normal forces are laid aside, and the ever-present elements of the spirit and soul commune with those of the forces as found in each entity. Study these and know thyself. One may be free in thought, though the body may be bound in chains, and be much more free than those who are chained by their own consciousness. Once the prospective self-healer understands his freedom of will and the choices he ought to make, then he is urged by Cayce to grasp the notion of responsibility. For underlying all the notions of freedom in Cayce's thought is the ever-recurrent note of our obligation to accept the consequences of our state and our choices. Responsibility then is really accountability. Each soul is accountable unto its maker for what it does with its opportunities at each and every turn of its experiences in that we call life in the earth's plane. Let each know that it is a harp upon which the breath of God will play. As seekers after divine guidance, be uplifted, and thus may ye hasten the day when war will be no more. We often feel that we are treated unjustly or that we deserve better than what we have. This is no doubt but a short and selfish view, and one that we must apply healing to. But the concept of responsibility dictates that we meet in the physical what we've done or thought in the mental and the spiritual. So we have or meet those various aspects in the experience of each individual, for where there have been the constructive or destructive aspects in the experience of each individual, they must be met in the same sphere or plane of activity in which they have been in action in the experience of the entity, and met according to that which is to be meted, meted. For what saith the law? As ye meet, mete, mate, I don't know. As ye meet, so shall it be meted to thee in thine own experience, in thine own activity. So as individuals in their material or mental experience of the material world find that they are in the activity of being mistreated, as from their own angle have they mistreated. If harshness has come to thine own experience, so has there been in thine own activity that which makes for sane, and so is experience in each phase. Responsibility tells us that we are here on this plane to learn and to use what the Lord has given us. He has allowed us to become co-workers with him in his healing apostolate. It's funny that I'm saying that word so awkwardly when I think I said it in a previous video that I grew up heavily Christian based, and more specifically apostolic. So it's funny that I'm saying that so awkwardly. Apostolic, and we are responsible to ourselves and to him to make use of that power and talent. This is left to the individual. The Lord can only offer man as his child, as a co-creator with the creative forces, accepts or rejects. There's no halfway. You are or you are not. To be sure, there are various stages of unfoldment or development, but use that which thou knowest to do, and the Lord will give thee the next step. He doesn't fail in his promises, even though ye may be far, far away. Although we are studying Cayce's healing techniques and methodology primarily for the purpose of self-healing, it should be evident that responsibility implies the use of such healing talents not just for ourselves, but also for others. Healing is knowledge of God, and that knowledge flowers when put to the service of others. There is a strong imperative that those seeking knowledge of God must seek that information for the good of others. When it is sought for the purpose of expanding one's ego and lording it over others, it becomes a detrimental experience. Rather, let the knowledge gained through dreams and visions be given to a dying world. Give it to those people who would approach the living way, the living water of life, that they may be established in the holy way that leads to the everlasting. This then will bring that feeling, that countenance, which when beheld by others will make them know that this one has approached the throne and brought back with him the shining light, that light which is a light at night and a cloud by day. Exodus 8:21. This will lend strength, this will bring strength, and so shroud doubt, fear, disappointment, and disrupt to such depths that only the true holy light will shine through you, guiding many to the way that leads to life everlasting. When one practices healing responsibility, he gains mercy and grace and love. He makes a choice of himself to those who need him. He manifests empathy and not selfishness. These will make for activities, but in what manner? For the law of the Lord is perfect, and whatsoever an entity and individual sows, that must he also reap. That is, law cannot be changed. As to whether one meets it in the letter of the law or in mercy and grace becomes the choices of the entity. If one would have mercy, grace, love, friend, one must show self in such a manner to those with whom one becomes associated. For like begets like. The self-healer must realize that he is responsible for whatever is happening to him, and accepting that responsibility is part and parcel of self-healing. For as Cayce says, we are constantly meeting ourselves. For each soul must meet in its own self that which the entity or body meets to its fellow man in its ideal relations with such. This body is meeting its own self, for it is meeting its own shortcomings when judged for some moral standards. This body then must first in its mental and spiritual attitude make amends, not merely promises to others, but to self and the sources of health and of life itself. These should be the beginnings in the body, not merely being dependent upon the applications which must be or may be made by others, for there are within self the conditions here taken which now bring undesirable results in the ability of the body to function in the manner either physically or mentally as is most desirable. But there would be first a change in mental and spiritual attitude. A person anxious to accept responsibility for his own life and the things that happen to him, as well as eager to use his talents in a responsive manner, ought to really engage in deep soul searching. For without an awareness of what happened and where one is going, responsibility becomes an empty word. For every soul, as every tub must stand upon its own self, and the soul that holds resentment owes the soul to whom it has held much. Hast thou forgiven him the wrong done thee? Then thou owest not. Do not attempt to be good, but rather good for something. Know what is thy purpose, what is thy goal, and unless these are found in constructive spiritual construction, they will turn again upon thyself, for each soul is meeting day by day itself. Hence as has been given, know thyself in whom thou believest, not of earthly, not of material things, but mental and spiritual, and why. And by keeping a record of self, not as a diary, but thy purposes, what you have thought, what you have desired, the good that you have done, we will find this will bring physical and mental reactions that will be in keeping with the purposes for which each soul enters a material manifestation. We alone are responsible then for what we are in our condition on this earth. The Edgar Cayce reading shows us that the individuality is the sum total of what the being has done about creative and ideal forces in its different experiences here on earth. The individuality changes as the entity acts, thinks, and feels in the present about its ideals, its experiences, and its opportunities. Problems, conditions, individuals, all these cause a reaction in the individuality. Each phase of the being has its separate attributes, which may be either physical or spiritual or both. Also, they may be one. To accomplish this, the entity must use the mind and the soul. In fact, Cayce has told us often enough that the mind is the builder. It is the pathway to either infinity or materiality. The important lesson here is for the self-heal. The important lesson here for the self-healer is that Cayce rejects the concept of victim. A person who is sick and who is in some way pained or in anguish will realize that each person is held responsible by Cayce for the circumstances in which he finds himself. The self-healer cannot blame anyone for his condition or his illness. He begins the healing process when he starts to take responsibility for his condition. He starts on the road to health when he accepts that he is not the innocent victim of his environment. He is simply meeting self. That is so true with honestly how I'm feeling. I'm lightheaded and all of that, so I'm completely responsible for it. I'm just so out of it. What ye sow, ye reap. There are often experiences in which individuals apparently reap that which they have not sown, but this is only the short self-vision of the entity or the one analyzing and studying purposes or ideals and relationships to those particular individuals. From the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh, and thoughts or deeds, and each builds to himself that which is to be a glorification or edification or resentment built in self. Then act in the way which is benefiting and responds in yourself. The self-healer finds it easier to accept responsibility when he accepts the power of choice that resides in his soul. He knows that responsibility also means that we are put on this earth for a purpose, therefore we are accountable. We find that there were those environs in which the attraction gave the opportunity for the entity to bring creative influences and forces in the experience, to meet self and thus correct such that had been and as in the way of development for the soul entity. For each soul enters that it may make its path straight. They alone who walk the straight and narrow way may know themselves to be themselves and yet one with the creative forces. Hence the purpose for each entrance is that the opportunities may be embraced by the entity for living being that which is creative and in keeping with the way. For the Father has not willed that any soul should perish, and is thus mindful that each soul has again and yet again the opportunity for making its paths straight. We are not put on this earth just for a whim or to satisfy someone else's need. No, we have purpose, and all things in the universe have purpose. This makes responsibility and freedom meaningful. We are not subject to the fates, nor are we doomed to dismal misfortunes. And the self-healer can brighten his own life and that of others by making himself aware of all the support that the purposefulness in the planet affords him. For it is not by chance that each entity enters, but that the entity as part of the whole may fill that place which no other soul may fill so well. Thus, with each material manifestation, there is an undertaking by an entity to so manifest that it, as a part of the whole, may become more and more attuned to that consciousness and thus glorify him in the entity's relationships to others and thus glorify him in the entity's relationships to others in any and in every experience. Thus, the urges latent or manifested are expressions of an entity in the varied phases of consciousness. In the material or earthly sojourn, these find expressions or manifestations in a three-dimensional manner. Each entity thus finds itself body, mind, and soul. These phases represent the three spiritual attributes that are understandable or comprehended in materiality. Yet as mental and spiritual become more and more expressive or controlling through the experiences in the earth, the entity becomes aware of other dimensions in its material sojourn. While body is subject to all its influences of materiality and may be controlled, the emotions thereof by the mind. The mind may be directed by spirit. Spirit is that portion of the first cause which finds expression in all that is everlasting in the consciousness of all mind or matter. And no urge, whether of the material sojourns or of the astrological aspects, surpasses the mental and spiritual abilities of a soul to choose its course that it, the soul and mind, may take. In materiality, then, as may be expressed in whatever environ a body has chosen, it becomes accustomed or attuned to the environs of that particular sphere of activity. Yet these may become localized, or they may become state or nation minded, or spiritual or fellow man minded, thereby altering the manner in which the entity may express itself, though under the same environ of others in that particular sphere of activity. When we speak of responsibility and freedom as vital to the concept of soul and the thought of Cayce, we must bring in his idea of karma. What is karma? It is a word very much in use today, and Cayce himself used it often enough. Remember that Cayce believed in the law of cause and effect. He said that whatever was happening to us was not the result of chance, but rather of self meeting self. We reap what we sow. Karma, then, is cause and effect in action. The Bible is filled with similar, if not identical, concepts. As ye do unto others, so shall it be done unto thee. Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, so that shall he also reap. Excuse me. I'm so sorry. I actually didn't even eat that much. I don't even know why I'm burping. I'm so sorry. Jesus put it well when he said, verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no ways pass from the law, till all be fulfilled. And again I tell thee, thou shalt not depart thence till thou hast paid the very last mite. And elsewhere, verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass away till all be fulfilled. Karma implies that man can only learn by doing, for he truly knows what he has experienced. It says that growth comes through adversity. The word karma then is used by Cayce in a philosophical sense to indicate conditions in the present stemming from thoughts and actions in the past. Its Sanskrit meaning encompasses both action and reaction or consequences. Its Hindu meaning implies work or the labor of the soul seeking to attain union with God. Today, most people think of karma as the law of cause and effect. What Cayce is telling us is that every effect has its cause. Accidents are the exception and hardly the rule. What this means for the self-healer is that he must realize that he will pay for even his most hidden thoughts and deeds, not only now, but in the future, realizing that this is the beginning of wisdom and the key to right living. Karma is the operation of a law, and so ordered and precise that it guarantees a constant flow of justice. We are constantly creating new karma for ourselves in the choices we make, the decision we reach. Sometimes the reaction is instant. More often than not, it is delayed in this life or the next. A nation that brings war on another, says Cayce, will have war brought upon it. That's karma. This is a very important facet of understanding for the healer. He must recognize that men are not simple beings, but they are quite complex. Each thought, each word, each act adds to the total structure of man's nature, says Cayce, and it all becomes fabric of the karmic patterns. What the healer must realize is that mind is the builder, and so no effort is ever misspent. Thought upon thought, line upon line, we build that which we are and will be in the future. The circumstances in which we find ourselves are just what we have earned. It is what we need or what we deserve. We have no one to blame. And what we do today is what we are going to get for ourselves today or tomorrow. For man is indeed the captain of his soul, the master of his fate. Cayce once asked to explain the operation of the law of retribution or karma. This is what he replied. Karma is a reaction which may be compared to the reaction within the body when a piece of food is taken into the system. The food is translated into a part of the body itself, penetrating to every cell and influencing the health of the body and mind. Thus it is with the soul when it enters a body for the experience in the earth. The person's thoughts are the food upon which the soul feeds, along with the actions which result from these thoughts. These thoughts and actions in turn have been generated by thoughts and actions behind them, and so on back to the birth of the soul. When the soul enters a new body in a new environment, a door is open leading to an opportunity for building the soul's destiny. Everything which has been previously built, both good and bad, is contained in that opportunity. There is always a way of redemption, but there is no way to dodge responsibilities which the soul has itself undertaken. Thus a life is a way of developing, a preparation for the cleansing of the soul, though it may be a hard path at times for the physical consciousness and the physical body. Changes come, and some people say luck has intervened, but it is not luck. It is a result of what the soul has done about its opportunities for redemption. In a reading to a male 40 who suffered from severe spinal deterioration, Cayce gave this understanding of karma. The entity is meeting self. When it was given, whatsoever sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. That means, in this case, the blood of his will, of his purpose, of his physical desire to carry on his own ways of activity, and by these conditions in the body itself being thwarted. The entity thwarted others and is meeting in itself. That is karma. Some people are afraid of karma. They allow it to beat them down, to turn them into cowards. Cayce teaches us that karma is not to be feared, but to be accepted and handled. Those interested in self-healing can learn from him how to deal with karma and their own misconceptions of this law. Each entity, each soul enters the material experience for purposes. These are not individual or of a selfish nature, though they are very personal in their application and their practice. Each soul meets constantly itself, not alone in what is called at times karma or karmic influences. For remember, life is God. That which is constructive grows, that which is destructive deteriorates. Then karmic forces, if the life application and experience of an individual entity grows to a haven of peace and harmony and understanding, or ye grow to heaven, rather than going to heaven, ye grow in grace and understanding. Remember then is this: there are promises made by the creative forces or God to the children of men, that if ye will be my daughter, my son, my child, I will indeed be thy God. This is an individual promise. Hence the purposes for an entrance the soul may be prepared for an indwelling with the soul, the mind of the living God. This is an individual promise. Oh Lord, I'm sorry, my nose is itching so bad. It's so bad. So bad. Yep, I read that one. How then, ye ask, are ye to know ye are on the straight and narrow way? My spirit beareth witness with thy spirit that ye are indeed the children of God. How? Thy God consciousness, thy soul, either condemns, rejects, or falters before conditions that exist in the experience of the mental and material self. Mind ever is the builder. In concluding this chapter on the soul, we would do well to realize that Cayce has given us quite a bit to consider. In brief summary, then, the self-healer must accept the reality and power of the soul, trying to understand its relationship to the mind and body. In attempting to bring about healing for the total entity, the self-healer must realize that balance depends on a proper use of freedom and an acceptance of responsibility. What Cayce taught about karma merely underscores the learn this lesson. It's really weird. It almost seems like there was supposed to be another sentence or something before his quotes. That's crazy. What Cayce taught about karma merely underscores and then he goes right to his quotes. Learn this lesson well. The spiritual truth, criticize not unless ye wish to be criticized, for with what measure ye meet, mete, it is measured to thee again. It may not be in the same way, but ye cannot even think bad of another without it affecting thee in a manner of destructive nature. Think well of others, and if ye cannot speak well of them, don't speak at all, but don't think it either. Try to see self in others' place. This will bring the basic spiritual forces that must be the prompting influence and the experience of each soul, if it would grow in grace and knowledge and understanding, not only of in knowledge and understanding, not only of its relationship to God, its relationship to its fellow man, but its relationships in the home and in the social life. I felt like I reread a sentence on accident. For know that the Lord thy God is one, and all that ye may know of God, of good, must first be within self. All ye may know of God must be manifest through thyself. To hear of him is not to know. To apply and live and be like him is to know. Thank you for joining me for these 2 videos that I'm about to post. I'll film again when I feel a little bit better. But thank you for joining me. Please enjoy your day, your weekend, your evening, your morning, whenever you're watching this. Be safe. Take care of yourself and your loved ones and your community to the best of your ability. I appreciate you all. You have a wonderful one. Bye.